The docking bay of Kepler Station buzzed with activity as Captain Lee Hyun watched his crew unload the last of their cargo. The Soul's Pride sat in Bay 7, her hull scarred from years of hauling freight between human colonies and alien trade hubs. She wasn't much to look at, but she was home. Hyun rubbed his tired eyes and checked his tablet. The cargo manifest showed everything accounted for: medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies, rare metals from the asteroid mines, and a shipment of Earth coffee that always sold well at alien stations. It had been a good run, profitable enough to keep his crew fed and the ship running. "Captain, we're all done here," called out Kim Dae from near the cargo ramp. The engineer wiped grease from his hands with an old rag. "Everything's offloaded, clean." The station crew took care of the rest. "Good work, Dae," Hyun replied. He looked around at his crew. They had been together for 3 years now. Park Jin was already checking his tablet for messages, probably planning his shore leave. Cho Woo stood guard by the cargo bay, ever watchful. Yoon Hana was organizing her medical supplies, making sure everything was secure. They were good people. Family, really. In the dangerous business of space freight, you needed people you could trust with your life. Pirates, equipment failures, and hostile aliens made every run a risk. But together, they had made it work. "All right, everyone," Hyun announced. "Shore leave starts now. We'll be here for 3 days while they service the ship. Be back by 0800 on Thursday, and don't spend all your pay in the first bar you find." Jin grinned. "No promises, Captain. I heard there's a poker game in Sector 5 that's been running for 2 weeks straight." "Just don't bet the ship," Hyun said with a smile. Jin was young and sometimes reckless, but he was the best navigator Hyun had ever worked with. The kid could plot a course through an asteroid field with his eyes closed. The crew scattered, each heading off to enjoy their time on the station. Hyun stayed behind to finish the paperwork and check on the maintenance schedule. The Soul's Pride needed new filters for the air recycling system, and the hyperdrive was making a noise that worried him. An hour later, Hyun finally locked up the ship and headed into the station. Kepler Station was a massive structure built into a dead asteroid. Humans had carved out living spaces, shops, bars, and docking bays from the rock. It was neutral territory where humans and aliens could trade without the politics that complicated things elsewhere. The main corridor was crowded with beings from dozens of different worlds. Hyun passed a group of tall, blue-skinned Aquari discussing water rights. A pair of insect-like Kreks clicked and chittered as they examined some machinery. At a food stand, a human woman served noodles to anyone brave enough to try Earth cuisine. Hyun found himself at Murphy's Bar, a human establishment that served real alcohol and didn't ask too many questions. The owner, an ex-military man named Murphy, nodded as Hyun walked in. "The usual, Captain?" Murphy asked, already reaching for a bottle of whiskey. "Make it a double," Hyun said, settling onto a stool. "It's been a long run." Murphy poured the drink and slid it across the bar. The whiskey burned pleasantly as Hyun took his first sip. Around him, other spacers shared stories, made deals, and tried to forget the loneliness of space for a while. That's when he noticed her. She sat alone at a corner table, tall and elegant with skin that seemed to shimmer like crystal. Her hair was white as starlight and her eyes glowed with a soft blue light. She was clearly alien, but unlike any species Hyun had seen before. What caught his attention wasn't her appearance, though. It was the way she was watching him. Not casually, like someone people-watching in a bar. She was studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Hyun tried to ignore her, focusing on his drink and the conversation at the bar. But every time he glanced in her direction, those glowing eyes were still fixed on him. Finally, she stood and walked over. Her movements were graceful, almost floating. When she reached his table, she gestured to an empty chair. "May I?" she asked. Her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Hyun nodded, curious despite himself. "Please." She sat down, never taking her eyes off him. Up close, her alien nature was even more obvious. Her skin really did look like living crystal, with patterns of light moving beneath the surface. Her fingers were longer than human fingers, ending in what looked like small gems. "I am Kira Velthani," she said. "I believe you are Captain Lee Hyun of the Soul's Pride." Hyun's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. "How do you know that?" "Relax," Kira said, holding up her hands. "I mean you no harm. I am a trader, like you. I know the names of most freight captains who work this sector." "What do you want?" Hyun asked, not relaxing. Kira was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell him. "My people, the Velthani, have certain abilities. We can sense the electromagnetic patterns that living beings produce. Emotions, thoughts, intentions, they all create unique signatures, Hyun frowned. Mind readers? Not exactly. We cannot hear your thoughts, but we can sense the energy they create. Happiness feels different than anger. Truth feels different than lies, she paused. Guilt has a very distinct signature. Why are you telling me this? Kira leaned forward. Because someone close to you is radiating both guilt and deception. Someone on your crew. Hyun laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. That's impossible. My crew has been with me for 3 years. We're family. Family can betray you too, Kira said quietly. Perhaps more easily than strangers. You're wrong, Hyun said, standing up. I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested. Kira remained seated, her expression sad but determined. Your crew, she said again. Someone stealing from you. The words hit Hyun like a physical blow. He sat back down heavily. That's not possible. I would know, would you? When did you last check your manifest carefully? When did you last verify your fuel consumption against your routes? When did you last count your emergency supplies? Hyun opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. The truth was he trusted his crew completely. He had stopped double-checking their work years ago. Why would he? They were family. I sense your confusion, Kira said gently. But I also sense that you know deep down that something has felt wrong lately. Small things. Details that didn't quite add up. Hyun thought back over the past few months. There had been small things. Fuel consumption that seemed higher than it should be. Cargo that arrived at destinations with seals that looked slightly different. Jin asking odd questions about their routes. Day working late in the engine room when everything seemed fine. Even if what you're saying is true, Hyun said slowly, why tell me? What do you get out of it? Kira smiled, the first genuine emotion he had seen from her. My people value honesty above all else. We believe that truth, no matter how painful, is better than comfortable lies, and she paused. I have seen what happens when theft and corruption spread through the freight industry. Good captains like you become rare. Pirates grow bold. Trade becomes dangerous for everyone. So this is about business? Partly, but also because you seem like a good man, and good men should know when they are being betrayed. Hyun stared at his drink, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to dismiss everything Kira had said. His crew was loyal. They were family. They had saved each other's lives multiple times. But another part of him, a small voice in the back of his mind, whispered that she might be right. There had been signs, small things he had ignored because he trusted the people around him. What exactly are you suggesting I do? He asked. Check your records. Look closely at things you have taken for granted. Trust your instincts. Kira stood up. But be careful. If I am right and someone on your crew is stealing from you, they may be desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing, Captain. In my experience, when there is one thief, there are often others. Corruption spreads like a disease. With that, she glided out of the bar, leaving Hyun alone with his thoughts and his growing fear that his comfortable world was about to fall apart. He finished his drink in one gulp and headed back to his ship. There were records to check. Hyun couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his captain's quarters aboard the Soul's Pride, staring at the ceiling while Kira's words echoed in his mind. Someone stealing from you. The alien's certainty had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. At 3 a.m, he gave up trying to sleep and made his way to the bridge. The ship was quiet, docked safely in Kepler Station's Bay 7. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the familiar controls and displays. This was his domain, his home. And the idea that someone he trusted might be betraying him here felt like a violation. Hyun settled into his command chair and activated his personal terminal. If there was theft happening on his ship, there would be evidence. Numbers didn't lie, even if people did. He started with the fuel consumption reports. The Soul's Pride ran on processed hydrogen, and every trip between stations required careful calculation of fuel needs. Too little fuel meant being stranded in space. Too much meant wasted money and reduced cargo capacity. The numbers looked normal at first glance. But as Hyun compared fuel purchases to actual consumption over the past 6 months, a pattern began to emerge. They were using more fuel than his calculations suggested they should need. Not a lot, maybe 5 or 10% more than expected, but consistently. Hyun frowned and dug deeper. He pulled up the route data that Jin had filed for their last 3 trips. The courses looked standard, taking advantage of gravitational slings and avoiding known pirate territories. But when Hyun overlaid the actual fuel consumption data, he noticed something odd. They had used fuel as if they had taken longer routes with extra stops or detours. Maybe Jin made some course corrections I didn't know about, Hyun muttered to himself. Space was dangerous, and navigators sometimes had to adjust routes for asteroids, solar flares, or other hazards. But Jin always reported course changes. It was standard procedure. Hyun made a note to ask Jin about it later, then moved on to the cargo manifests. This was where he really trusted his crew. Day handled the loading systems, Wu managed security, and Hana took care of any special cargo requirements like temperature-controlled medical supplies. The manifests looked correct. Every item that had been loaded was accounted for in the delivery records. But as Hyun compared weights and volumes over multiple trips, he noticed small discrepancies. Cargo that should have weighed 10 tons was recorded as weighing 9.5 tons. Shipments that should have filled a certain volume showed up as smaller. The differences were tiny, the kind of thing that could easily be explained as measurement errors or rounding. But they were consistent, and they were always in the same direction. Cargo appearing smaller or lighter than it should be. Hyun's stomach began to twist with worry. He pulled up the maintenance records next. Every repair, every replacement part, every system check was supposed to be logged. Dae was meticulous about maintenance. It was one of the things Hyun most valued about his engineer. But as he scrolled through the records, Hyun noticed gaps. Small ones, but they were there. Times when the ship's system showed power consumption spikes that weren't explained by any logged maintenance. Periods when the cargo bay doors had been opened and closed according to the ship's sensors, but no corresponding entry in the maintenance log. This doesn't make sense, Hyun said to the empty bridge. There had to be explanations for all of this. His crew wouldn't steal from him. They were family, but the numbers kept adding up to something wrong. Hyun spent the next hour going through their recent shipping contracts and delivery confirmations. Most of their cargo was routine: medical supplies, manufactured goods, raw materials. Nothing exotic or particularly valuable, but 3 times in the past 2 months they had carried high-value shipments. Rare metals, advanced electronics, and once a container of earth art heading to a wealthy collector on a rim world. In each case, the delivery had gone smoothly. The cargo had arrived on time and the clients had signed off on receiving everything they expected. But Hyun noticed something in the shipping documents. The security seals on the containers had been replaced during transit. That was unusual. Security seals were meant to show if cargo had been tampered with. They were only supposed to be broken by the recipient. If a seal was damaged during shipping, it was a major problem that required immediate reporting and investigation. But in all 3 cases, the documentation showed that the original seals had been damaged during routine handling and replaced with new ones. The replacement had been authorized by Wu as chief of security and witnessed by either Dae or Jin. Hyun leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. Individually, each of these things could be explained away. Equipment malfunctions, measurement errors, damaged seals, they all happened in the freight business. But taken together, they painted a picture that made him sick. His crew, his family, might really be stealing from him. A noise from the corridor made him quickly close his files. He heard footsteps on the metal deck plating, slow and careful. Someone was moving through the ship. Hyun held his breath and listened. The footsteps stopped outside the bridge. Then he heard the soft beep of someone entering an access code into the bridge door panel. The door slid open and Jin stepped in. The young navigator looked surprised to see Hyun sitting at the command station. "Captain, you're up early," Jin said. His voice sounded normal, but Hyun thought he detected a note of nervousness. "Couldn't sleep," Hyun replied, trying to keep his own voice casual. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to start plotting our next course," Jin said. "Thought I'd get a jump on things before shore leave ended." It was a reasonable explanation. Jin was usually eager to work, and planning routes took time. But they hadn't even received their next shipping contract yet. "There was no course to plot. That's dedication," Hyun said. "But we don't have our next job assignment yet." Jin nodded quickly. "Right, of course. I guess I'm just restless. Shore leave makes me nervous, all these people around." He gestured vaguely toward the station beyond the ship's hull. "Why don't you get some sleep?" Hyun suggested. "We'll have plenty of work soon enough." "Good idea, Captain." See you in the morning. Jin left, but not before Hyun caught him glancing at the computer terminal. Had he seen what Hyun was working on? The file windows had been closed, but the terminal was still active. Hyun waited 10 minutes, then quietly made his way to Jin's quarters. The navigator's room was small, like all crew quarters on a freight ship. Hyun had been here before, usually for crew meetings or when Jin was sick. But now he looked at it with suspicious eyes. Jin's personal tablet sat on his small desk, connected to a charging cable. Next to it was a stack of data chips and a small device Hyun didn't recognize. It looked like a scanner or data reader of some kind. Hyun picked up the device carefully. It was definitely not standard ship equipment. The casing was unmarked, but it had ports that would fit the ship's data chips. A cold realization hit him. This could be used to copy navigation data, route information, shipping schedules. Information that would be very valuable to pirates. Hyun put the device back exactly where he had found it, his hands shaking slightly. He backed out of Jin's quarters and returned to the bridge, his mind racing. If Jin was selling their route information to pirates, it would explain a lot. It would explain why they never seemed to encounter pirates themselves. Jin would make sure they avoided dangerous areas. It would also explain the extra fuel consumption. Jin might be adding small detours to their routes, meeting with contacts or dropping off data chips. But Jin couldn't be working alone. The cargo discrepancies, the maintenance gaps, the replaced security seals, those involved other crew members. Day would have to be involved with the cargo handling. Wu would have to be part of the security seal replacements. The scope of the betrayal was becoming clear, and it made Hyun feel sick. This wasn't one person making a mistake or yielding to temptation. This was a coordinated effort by his entire crew to steal from him. Over the next 2 days, Hyun watched his crew more carefully. He noticed things he had missed before, the way Day sometimes worked late in the cargo bay, supposedly doing maintenance but never actually fixing anything specific. How Wu often volunteered to handle security inspections alone, saying he didn't need help. How Hana always seemed to have extra medical supplies that she claimed were samples or backups. Each of them had opportunities to steal, and now that he was looking for it, Hyun could see signs of guilt in their behavior. They were more nervous around him, quicker to explain their actions, more defensive about their work. On their last night at Kepler Station, Hyun sat in his quarters with a bottle of whiskey and a growing pile of evidence. Data files, shipping records, maintenance logs, fuel reports. It all pointed to the same terrible conclusion. His crew, the people he trusted most in the universe, had been systematically robbing him blind. The question now was what to do about it. Hyun spent the morning after they left Kepler Station planning his trap. The Soul's Pride was back in space, heading toward their next destination. But Hyun's mind was focused on catching thieves rather than navigation. He needed proof, solid evidence that would show exactly who was stealing from him and how. He called Jin to the bridge first. The navigator came quickly, tablet in hand, ready to discuss course adjustments or fuel calculations. "Jin, I've got a special job for us," Hyun said, keeping his voice casual. "High-value cargo, premium rates, but it's sensitive." Jin's eyes lit up with interest. "What kind of cargo, Captain?" "Rare earth elements, mining equipment, worth about 2 million credits." Hyun watched Jin's face carefully as he spoke. "The pickup is at Cygnus Mining Station. Delivery to New Sol Colony. Simple run, but the client is paying triple rates for discretion." "Sounds good," Jin said. "When do we need to file the route?" "Today, but keep it quiet for now. I don't want word getting out about what we're carrying." Hyun saw something flicker across Jin's expression. Excitement, maybe, or calculation. "Of course, Captain. I'll plot the most secure route possible." After Jin left, Hyun called Day to the bridge. The engineer arrived wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag as usual. "What's the word, Captain?" Day asked. "I need you to prep Cargo Bay 2 for a special shipment," Hyun said. "Temperature-controlled storage, extra security locks. The client is very particular about how their goods are handled." "No problem." "What kind of cargo?" "Advanced electronics. Computer cores and memory storage units. Very fragile, very expensive." Hyun handed him a data pad with fake specifications. "The loading procedures are all in there." "And Day, this stays between us for now." Day nodded and glanced at the specifications. "Looks straightforward. I'll have everything ready." Next was Wu. Hyun found the security chief in the armory. cleaning his weapons as he did every morning. "Wu, I need to brief you on our next job," Hyun said, closing the armory door behind him. "Special security requirements?" Wu asked without looking up from his rifle. "Definitely. We're carrying medical supplies to a plague zone. Experimental treatments very valuable on the black market." Hyun sat down across from him. "I'm worried about pirates, maybe corrupt officials trying to intercept the shipment." Wu finally looked up. "What kind of security are we talking about?" "Random route changes, extra sensor sweeps, armed escort protocols. And I'll need you to personally verify all security seals before we reach the destination." "Understood," Wu said. "Do we know what specific treatments we're carrying?" "Antiviral medications, synthetic antibodies, that sort of thing. Worth about 3 million on the legitimate market, probably 10 times that on the black market." Finally, Hyun spoke with Hana in the medical bay. She was organizing supply cabinets, another routine she performed religiously. "Hana, I wanted to give you a heads up about our next cargo," he said. "Medical supplies?" she asked hopefully. She always liked it when they carried medical cargo. It meant she could sometimes acquire extra supplies for colonies that needed them. "Art and cultural artifacts," Hyun said. "From Earth museums heading to a private collector. Paintings, sculptures, rare books. Irreplaceable stuff." Hana looked disappointed. "Oh, not exactly my area. Actually, it is. The client specifically requested that we have medical staff supervise the environmental controls. The artifacts need precise temperature and humidity management to avoid damage." "I can handle that," Hana said. "How valuable are we talking?" "The insurance paperwork lists everything at about 5 million credits. Some of the pieces are one of a kind." After speaking with each crew member separately, Hyun returned to his quarters and activated his personal monitoring system. The Soul's Pride had security cameras and communication monitors throughout the ship, but they were normally only used during emergencies. As captain, Hyun had access to all of them. He spent the next day watching his crew's behavior and monitoring their communications. The results were worse than he had feared. Within hours of their conversation, Jin had sent an encrypted message to someone at Kepler Station. The message was brief and coded, but Hyun recognized key phrases: premium cargo, Cygnus route, and triple security. Jin was definitely selling information about their routes. Day had accessed the ship's inventory system multiple times, checking storage capacity and environmental controls, but he had also accessed files he shouldn't need for legitimate cargo preparation. He looked up the ship's insurance policies, cargo replacement procedures, and damage assessment protocols. Why would an engineer need that information unless he was planning to make something disappear? Wu's actions were more subtle but equally damning. He had reviewed the ship's sensor logs, communication protocols, and even the personal background files on the crew. Most disturbing, he had accessed the emergency procedures for cargo jettisoning and distress signal protocols. It looked like he was preparing for scenarios that went beyond simple theft. Hana surprised him the most. She had sent 3 messages to contacts on different colonies, all encrypted, but she had also accessed medical databases, looking up information about rare diseases, treatment protocols, and medical supply pricing. It seemed like she was already planning what to do with stolen medical supplies. But the real proof came when Hyun checked the ship's system logs. Each crew member had accessed files related to the fake cargo he had described to them. Jin had looked up shipping routes to New Sol Colony. Day had researched rare earth element storage requirements. Wu had checked security protocols for high-value shipments. Hana had reviewed environmental control procedures for art preservation. None of them had discussed the cargo details with each other, which meant each was keeping their own secrets about the information Hyun had given them. More damning, each had also accessed systems they didn't need for their supposed cargo preparations. Jin had looked at the ship's emergency fund accounts. Dee had reviewed cargo insurance policies. Wu had checked communication logs and crew personal files. Hana had researched medical supply black market prices. They weren't just stealing cargo. They were stealing money, information, and anything else they could get their hands on. On the second day, Hyun discovered the worst evidence yet. He found hidden files in the ship's computer system, buried in maintenance logs and navigation data. The files contained detailed records of their thefts over the past year. Jin had been selling route information to pirates for months, earning thousands of credits per tip. But he had been careful to only sell information about other ships, never the Soul's Pride. He was protecting his own job while putting other freight crews in danger. Day had been skimming cargo systematically. Small amounts from each shipment, never enough to be noticed immediately. He had also been stealing fuel, selling it to black market dealers at stations throughout the sector. Wu had been the most ambitious. He had been allowing criminal contacts to inspect valuable cargo during routine stops, taking small items that wouldn't be missed until delivery. He had also been selling information about passenger manifests and security procedures to criminal organizations. Hana had been stealing medical supplies, but her motives were more complex. She had been selling some supplies for profit, but she had also been giving supplies away to colonies that couldn't afford proper medical care. She was stealing for both greed and charity. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Each crew member thought they were the only thief, but together they had been bleeding Hyun's operation for over a year. They had stolen money, cargo, fuel, information, and supplies. They had put other ships at risk and violated every principle of trust that held freight crews together. Hyun sat in his quarters that night, staring at the evidence files on his tablet. Photos of stolen goods, communication logs with criminal contacts, financial records showing unexplained income. It was all there. His crew, the people he had trusted with his life, had been systematically robbing him blind. They had looked him in the eye every day, shared meals with him, laughed at his jokes, and accepted his trust while stealing everything they could get their hands on. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. These weren't strangers or recent hires. Jin had been with him for 3 years. Day had saved his life twice during equipment failures. Wu had stood guard over him while he slept in dangerous ports. Hana had patched him up after bar fights and accidents. They were family. And family had betrayed him. But now Hyun had proof. Solid, undeniable evidence of what each crew member had done. The question was what to do with it. He could confront them individually, try to work out some kind of arrangement. He could report them to station authorities and have them arrested. He could try to pretend he didn't know and just live with the knowledge that his crew was stealing from him, or he could do something more direct. Hyun opened his personal safe and pulled out the termination, contracts he kept for emergencies. Standard forms that would immediately end each crew member's employment and remove them from the ship. He had never used them before. In 3 years, he had never had to fire anyone. But tonight he filled out 4 forms, one for each member of his crew. Tomorrow he would find out what happened when trust was completely broken. 6 months later, Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching his new crew work with quiet satisfaction. The ship hummed around him, every system running smoothly. Under the careful attention of people he was learning to trust again. It had been the hardest 6 months of his life. The first month, after firing, his entire crew had nearly killed him. Running a freight ship alone was technically possible, but practically suicidal. He had to plot courses, manage cargo, handle maintenance, and stay awake for dangerous stretches of space travel. He survived on stimulants and stubbornness, taking only the smallest, safest cargo runs. Other captains thought he was crazy. Word spread quickly through the freight community about the captain who had fired his entire crew for stealing. Most people shook their heads and predicted he would be dead within weeks. "You can't run a clean operation in this business," Captain Morrison had told him at Kepler Station. "Everyone steals a little. Everyone cuts corners. That's just how things work out here." But Hyun had refused to accept that. If the freight industry was corrupt, then someone had to start changing it. If everyone stole, then someone had to stop stealing. And if no one else would do it, he would. The first new crew member he hired was Park Min, a young woman from Mars Colony who had just graduated from engineering school. She was green, inexperienced, and eager to learn. More importantly, she was honest. "I've never worked on a freight ship before," she admitted during her interview. "But I've heard about what you did. Standing up to thieves, I mean. My father runs a small business on Mars, and he's always fighting corruption. He taught me that sometimes you have to take a stand even when it costs you." Min was nothing like Day. She asked questions instead of pretending to know everything. She documented every repair and replacement part. She volunteered for extra shifts and never complained about the long hours. The second hire was Lee Bo, a navigator who had been blacklisted from other ships for refusing to participate in illegal route-selling schemes. He was older than Jin, more experienced, and completely committed to legal operations. "I lost my last job for refusing to sell information to pirates," he told Hyun. My captain said I was being naive, that everyone does it. But I couldn't sleep at night knowing that families were dying because of information I provided. Bo brought a methodical approach to navigation that impressed Hyun. He planned routes with backup options, filed proper reports with station authorities, and never made course changes without full documentation. For security chief, Hyun hired Kim Soo, a former military police officer who had left the service to care for her sick mother. She was small but tough, with a reputation for absolute honesty and fierce loyalty to anyone who earned her trust. "I've seen what corruption does to organizations," she said during her interview. "It starts small. Someone takes a little extra, someone looks the other way on minor violations. But it spreads like cancer. Pretty soon nobody trusts anybody, and the whole operation falls apart." Sue implemented security protocols that were stricter than anything Hyun had used before. Every cargo container was photographed before loading and after unloading. All security seals were documented with timestamps and video records. She maintained detailed logs of every person who accessed the cargo areas. The final crew member was Dr. Yoon Tae, a medic who had lost his previous job for refusing to falsify medical certificates for captains who wanted to avoid quarantine delays. "Medical integrity isn't negotiable," he explained. "If I lie about health conditions to save time or money, people die. I'd rather be unemployed than responsible for spreading disease or hiding medical emergencies." Tae brought a level of professionalism to the medical bay that impressed everyone. He maintained perfect inventory records, followed all health protocols, and never requested supplies he couldn't justify with proper documentation. The new crew worked differently than Hyun's old team. They questioned procedures, double-checked each other's work, and maintained detailed records of everything they did. They were slower at first, more cautious, but also more reliable. "It feels strange at first," Min admitted after their second run together, "being so careful about everything. But I sleep better at night knowing that everything we do is legal and honest. It's how things should be," Bo added. "I spent 10 years watching crews cut corners and steal from their captains. This is the first ship I've worked on where I don't have to worry about what my crewmates are doing behind my back." The change in atmosphere was remarkable. Instead of the casual camaraderie that had hidden betrayal, the Soul's Pride now had professional respect built on trust. The crew worked together not because they were friends, but because they shared the same values. Their reputation began to spread. Other ship captains noticed that the Soul's Pride always arrived on schedule with undamaged cargo. Station authorities began to trust Hyun's crew completely, often skipping the detailed inspections they required for other ships. More importantly, alien traders began specifically requesting human ships that followed the Soul model. Hyun learned this firsthand when he encountered Kira Velthani again at New Tokyo Station. The crystalline alien approached him in the same bar where they had first met, but this time her expression was approving. "Captain Hyun," she said, settling into the chair across from him, "I have been watching your progress with interest." "Watching how?" Hyun asked, though he wasn't really surprised. The Velthani seemed to keep track of everything that happened in the freight industry. "My people have contacts throughout this sector. We hear about ships that arrive on time, cargo that arrives undamaged, crews that can be trusted." She smiled, an expression that looked strange on her alien features. "Your name comes up frequently in these conversations. We're just doing our job." "No," Kira said firmly. "You're doing much more than that. You are setting an example." She activated a small device that projected a holographic display above their table. It showed shipping routes, delivery schedules, and cargo manifests from dozens of different ships. 6 months ago, theft and piracy in this sector were increasing every month. Ships were being attacked, cargo was disappearing, and trust between traders was breaking down. The display showed red indicators marking problem areas and failed deliveries. But something has changed recently. The display shifted to show more recent data. The red indicators were fewer, replaced by green symbols marking successful deliveries and satisfied clients. "Human ships following your operational model have a success rate 15% higher than the sector average. Alien traders are beginning to request human crews specifically, especially for valuable cargo." Kira looked at him intently. "Your species is developing a reputation for reliability and honesty that we have never seen before." Hyun studied the data, amazed by what he was seeing. "Other captains are copying our methods?" "Some are. Others are improving their own operations to compete with you. A few are even firing crew members who refuse to meet higher standards. Kira's expression became serious. Change is spreading through the human freight industry, Captain. And it started with your decision to fire 4 thieves. I just did what felt right. That is exactly why it is working. You did not calculate the costs and benefits. You did not compromise or look for middle ground. You simply chose to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. Kira deactivated the holographic display and leaned back in her chair. My people have been trading with dozens of species for centuries. We have seen many different approaches to commerce and cooperation, but what you humans are doing now is unusual. How so? Most species accept a certain level of corruption as unavoidable. They build systems to manage it, control it, minimize its damage, but they never try to eliminate it completely. Her eyes glowed brighter. Humans seem to believe that perfect honesty is actually possible, and more remarkably, you are willing to sacrifice everything to achieve it. Not all humans, Hyun pointed out. My old crew were human too. Yes, but they were behaving like most other species, taking what they could get away with, justifying their actions as normal business practice. You chose a different path. Kira stood to leave, then paused. There is something else you should know, Captain. The Vilthani Trade Consortium has been discussing new policies for selecting shipping partners. We are considering giving preference to human crews that meet certain integrity standards. What kind of standards? Complete transparency in operations, zero tolerance for theft or corruption, detailed documentation of all procedures. She smiled again. Standards based on your operational model. After she left, Hyun sat alone in the bar, thinking about what she had said. He had fired his crew because he couldn't stand being betrayed by people he trusted. He had never intended to start a movement or change an entire industry. But apparently that's exactly what had happened. Over the following months, Hyun continued to hear similar stories. Human freight crews were being held to higher standards throughout the sector. Some captains complained about the increased oversight and documentation requirements. Others embraced the changes and found that their operations became more profitable as they earned better reputations. The Soul's Pride became a model that other ships tried to copy. Hyun received requests from young crew members who wanted to work on an honest ship. Hyun stood outside the conference room at 800 sharp, holding 4 termination contracts and trying to steady his nerves. The Soul's Pride had arrived at Titan Station during the night, and his crew was expecting their usual morning briefing about cargo schedules and maintenance priorities. Instead, they were about to learn that their lives as freight workers were over. He entered the conference room to find his crew already seated around the small table. Jin was reviewing navigation charts on his tablet. Day had brought coffee for everyone, as he always did. Wu sat quietly, alert and professional. Hana was organizing her medical reports from their last run. They looked so normal, so familiar. For a moment, Hyun almost lost his resolve. These people had been his family for 3 years. They had shared dangers, celebrated successful runs, and supported each other through the loneliness of space travel. But then he remembered the evidence files on his tablet. The stolen cargo, the sold information, the systematic betrayal that had been going on for months. Family didn't steal from family. "Good morning, everyone," Hyun said, keeping his voice level and professional. "Morning, Captain," they replied almost in unison. Hyun didn't sit down. Instead, he placed 4 data pads on the table, one in front of each crew member. "These are your termination contracts. You're all fired, effective immediately. You have 2 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave the ship." The silence that followed was complete. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just stared at the data pads as if they couldn't understand what they were seeing. Jin was the first to break the silence. "Captain, I don't understand. What's going on?" "You know exactly what's going on," Hyun replied. "All of you do." Day picked up his termination contract and scrolled through it quickly. "This is crazy, Hyun. We're family. We've been together for 3 years. You can't just throw us out without explanation." "I can and I am." Hyun activated his tablet and displayed the evidence files on the room's main screen. Navigation data sold to pirates. Cargo systematically stolen. Fuel skimmed and sold on black markets. Security protocols violated. Medical supplies diverted. As the evidence appeared on screen, Hyun watched their faces change. The confusion gave way to recognition, then fear, then desperate calculation. "Hyun, let me explain," Jin said quickly. "It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, Hyun cut him off. You've been selling our route information to criminals for months. Other freight crews have been attacked because of information you provided. Jin's face went pale. I never sold information about our routes. Only other ships. I was protecting us. By putting innocent people in danger. Hyun's voice was cold. How many crews have been killed because of your greed, Jin? I don't know. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Hyun turned to Dae. And you've been stealing cargo since last Christmas. Small amounts. Nothing that would be noticed immediately. Plus fuel, spare parts, whatever you could get your hands on. Dae set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. I was going to pay it back. I have debts, Hyun. My sister needs medical treatment and the insurance doesn't cover everything. I was desperate. So you decided to steal from the man who trusted you with his ship? Who gave you a home and a job? Hyun shook his head. Your sister's medical bills don't justify theft, Dae. I saved your life twice, Dae said, his voice rising. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for everything. That's why I trusted you. That's why this hurts so much. Hyun faced Woo next. You've been the most creative. Allowing your criminal friends to inspect our valuable cargo. Taking small items that wouldn't be missed until delivery. Selling security information to anyone willing to pay. Using your position to help criminals target other ships. Woo didn't deny it. He sat quietly, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. The freight business is dirty, Captain. Everyone cuts corners. Everyone has side deals. I thought you knew and just didn't want to talk about it. I trusted you to protect this ship and crew. Instead, you've been helping criminals rob other people. Other people were going to get robbed anyway. At least this way, we got something out of it. The casual way Woo dismissed the suffering of other crews made Hyun's anger flare. Those other people have families too. They're trying to make an honest living just like we were. Finally, he turned to Hana. And you've been stealing medical supplies, some to sell, some to give away to colonies that can't pay for proper medical care. Hana's eyes filled with tears. Those colonies are dying, Hyun. Children are sick because they can't afford medicine. I was trying to help people. By stealing from me? By violating the trust of our clients? Hyun's voice softened slightly. Of all the betrayals, hers was the most understandable. If you wanted to help those colonies, you should have talked to me. We could have found legal ways to get them supplies. Would you have said yes? She asked. I don't know. But you never gave me the chance. You decided to steal instead of trust me. The room fell silent again. Each crew member stared at their termination contract, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. Jin tried again. Captain, please. We can work this out. I'll pay back everything I took. I'll stop selling information. Give us another chance. There are no second chances for this, Hyun replied. You didn't make a mistake. You didn't have a moment of weakness. You made a choice every day for months to steal from me, to betray my trust, to put other people in danger. Dae leaned forward. So what happens now? You're going to run the ship alone? That's my problem, not yours. You can't do it, Woo said flatly. A freight ship needs at least 4 people to run safely. You'll be dead within a month. Maybe. But at least I'll be dead honest. Hana wiped tears from her eyes. This is insane, Hyun. We're family. Families forgive each other. Families don't steal from each other, Hyun shot back. And even if they did, there has to be consequences. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. So you're willing to destroy everything we built together? Jin asked. 3 years of working together, of trusting each other, of being family. You're going to throw that all away? I'm not throwing it away, Hyun said quietly. You already did that. The day you decided to steal from me, you threw away everything we built. This is about money, Dae said bitterly. In the end, that's all that matters to you. No, Hyun replied. This is about trust and honor and doing the right thing even when it's hard. He gestured to the evidence files still displayed on the screen. You didn't just steal money from me. You put other crews in danger. You violated the trust of our clients. You turned our ship into a criminal operation. Everyone does it, Woo insisted. The whole freight industry is corrupt. Not everyone. And not this ship. Not anymore. Hyun walked to the door and opened it. Station security is waiting outside to escort you off the ship. You have 2 hours to pack your personal belongings. After that, if you're still aboard, you'll be arrested for trespassing. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. They wore the blue uniforms of Titan Station Security. and their presence made everything final and official. "This is really happening," Jin said in disbelief. "This is really happening," Hyun confirmed. One by one, his former crew members stood up and left the conference room. Jin tried to speak to him again as he passed, but Hyun turned away. Dae shook his head sadly and muttered something about family loyalty. Woo left without a word, his face stone cold. Hana paused at the door, tears still streaming down her face. "I really was trying to help people," she said. "I know," Hyun replied, "but you chose to help them by hurting me. That's not help. That's just theft with good intentions." After they left, Hyun sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by the termination contracts and evidence files. In the span of 10 minutes, he had destroyed 3 years of relationships and left himself completely alone on a ship that needed at least 4 people to operate safely. Other captains would think he was crazy. Good crews were hard to find, and everyone in the freight business cut corners. He could have worked out payment plans, set up better oversight, found ways to manage the theft without losing his entire crew. But Hyun knew that once trust was broken this completely, it could never be rebuilt. He would never again feel safe sleeping while Jin plotted courses. He would never trust Dae alone in the cargo bay. He would always wonder what Woo was really doing during security checks. He would question every medical supply that Hana requested. The Soul's Pride would be a ship full of suspicion and doubt, and that was no way to live. 2 hours later, Hyun watched through the bridge viewport as his former crew left the ship for the last time. Each carried a single bag of personal belongings. They didn't look back. The ship felt empty now, hollow. But it also felt clean.